Genesis!
Hey, music fans, and welcome back to the Genesis series. This is episode 3, Nursery Cryme, and we are jumping into the first album to feature Phil Collins and Steve Hackett. I am super stoked to talk about this album. Jacob, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing good. I'm so excited to talk about this album as well. This is again, I've not listened to these Genesis albums before, and especially the Peter Gabriel era is a bit of a blind spot. But I gotta say, this is an amazing album. Just the fact that you got Phil Collins added to the group with this album, I think just shows a big difference because his drumming in this album is absolutely amazing. Along with the other members, they're good too.
Of course, but like his drumming just adds another level to this sound, especially on one particular song. Well, all the songs really, but one particular song really stands out above the other ones. But before we get into it, speaking of Phil Collins, I'm just going to give a little bit of background information.
Background information!
Okay, so we had Trespass, and right after Trespass, here's what happens. Anthony Phillips, the guitar player, kind of has some stage fright. And so he ends up leaving the band. Mayhew, the drummer, he left as well. And so we got two spots that are needed to be filled. So they put out an ad in Melody Maker magazine, I think. It was answered by Phil Collins and Steve Hackett were the ones that they ended up going with. Steve Hackett is an amazing guitar player. Phil Collins, an amazing drummer. Steve Hackett kind of reminds me of David Gilmour in the fact that he plays, like, he's one of those just play what's needed kind of guitar players rather than playing a million notes, and because of that, every time he plays something, you remember it. And Phil Collins has an amazing feel for drums. You can feel he's a very young drummer who's at the top of his game, ready to get into a professional band, and man, he just really adds a new dimension to this particular band and this particular album. So, Jacob, what are your just kind of general thoughts about this album?
All right. I really like this album. I think of the three albums, this is easily my favorite one so far. As mentioned already, I think Phil Collins has a nice extra layer to this band. And I commented on the little private group chat we have. He's one of my favorite drummers in rock. Uh, this album is definitely proof of that. There's some excellent drumming on this album that makes all the songs pop. And it's great hearing the artistry of this band on this album and the talents of all the members between him, Peter Gabriel, even the addition of Steve Hackett as the drummer, along with Tony Banks, Mike Rutherford. They all are on their A game on this album. There's some epic songs on this album, and I can't wait to talk about this one. There's some really good stuff here.
So, I would agree this is definitely my favorite of the three albums we've covered so far. Possibly even my favorite Genesis album, period, but we've got a lot of albums to go. I think that Steve Hackett and Phil Collins were exactly what this band needed because they took an already epic band that we had on Trespass and really took them to the next level. The musicianship is amazing. I love the epic songs on here and some of the British humor that they're kind of weaving into some of these songs, especially Harold the Barrel. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into our first song. Our first song is called The Musical Box.
All right. Now, this was an interesting way to open the album. 10-minute song. I think it's summed up in two sections because you got this slower part at the beginning of the song, and then it picks up, and then the guitar really comes out. Phil Collins on the drums. But it's a really weird song. This musical box, a reference to Old King Cole, a mallet, and this really twisted love story. But I was never bored by this song. The instruments, the production on this album is amazing. Especially I like the guitar work on this song. And it's not in my top three, but I still think it's a good way to open the album and a good way to introduce Phil Collins and Steve Hackett into the group.
Yeah, talking about that amazing guitar, Steve Hackett really just like the other guy, Anthony Phillips, was good. I know he's kind of a well-respected musician, but like, man, Steve Hackett's guitar playing is amazing. I love how it just kind of starts off with the guitar playing that kind of sounds like a musical box. Boom, 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 boom. From what I understand, this song is kind of about like childhood innocence being lost, and it kind of starting about like a child who just loves to hear the old King Cole song, but then like when he grows up, he's like, my nurse told me lies, and like nursery rhymes aren't true, and it kind of goes more into like the twisted love story, like you were talking about, like loss of innocence. Phil Collins really makes a statement on this song. He is a very good drummer, and that's going to continue through the rest of this album. Epic is definitely a word that I would use to describe this song. It is amazing, and it's really something you just kind of got to hear for yourself to really experience. So that is our first song. We're going to get to song number 2, called For Absent Friends.
All right. Now, what's fascinating about this song is Phil Collins actually sings on this track. I was not expecting him to sing on this album. I didn't think he started singing Genesis songs until after Peter Gabriel left. So it was cool that he got a song on this album. Unfortunately, it's my least favorite song on the album. It clocks in under 2 minutes. Yeah, it's fine. There's some good guitar work on it. But to me, it just feels like a transition song between two really amazing tracks. It just seems like it's just a shoe-in to get to the next track. And also, Phil Collins' vocals are kind of weird on this album. Like, I think he's trying to impersonate Peter Gabriel, which I felt like is kind of a weird thing. I kind of wish he, I don't know, sang like Phil Collins, like what I'm used to hearing.
He hasn't found his voice yet.
That's probably why. I guess it's kind of like, Steven Tyler on the original Aerosmith album, where you listen to it as like, yeah, Dream On's an amazing song, but the rest of the album is like, Steven Tyler sounds weird on this album. I guess it's one of those cases, but whatever. I don't hate it, but it's easily my least favorite track.
Phil Collins kind of starts out singing like he's impersonating Peter Gabriel, and then he comes more into his own voice as he goes along. And it isn't really until the album Duke where I feel like he really gets his voice that you know him for.
Yeah.
Even though Trick of the Tail is an amazing album, but I don't feel like Phil really becomes his own singer until the Duke album in 1980. But I actually really like this song. I think it's interesting to see where the guy who wrote In the Air Tonight got his start. Like, this is the first song you ever hear Phil Collins sing. And while it is a very short and simple song, I just like it for the fact that this is the first time that Phil Collins ever sang on something, and I just find it very interesting. It's not my favorite song on this album. It's probably my second to least favorite on this album, but I still think it's pretty cool. Now we are going to get to something amazing. And I'm going to try to say it like Peter Gabriel does on the Genesis live album. The Return of the Giant Hogweed.
Yeah, this is an amazing song. This one, when we reviewed Trespass, I said The Knife was my favorite song by Peter Gabriel. Well, that's been challenged because this song is amazing. Yeah, it's got this great guitar work that opens it. And then Phil Collins kicks in on the drums, and you said he made a statement on the musical box, but I think he makes an even greater statement on this song. Like, he really rocks out on the drums on this song, and it's absolutely amazing. And even Peter Gabriel, the way he sings on this song, like, he's very growly, and aggressive on this song.
Melodramatic is how I would describe it.
Yeah, that works too. But man, he goes it. This is like probably the heaviest thing Peter Gabriel's ever done, and I love it for it. And even with all the heavy stuff, it's also weirdly comical at the same time. Like I would describe this song as British Little Shop of Horrors. If you've
Mm-hmm.
seen that movie, story wise, it's like the hogweed is this giant toxic plant that's going around savaging everything. And so to me, I just thought of Little Shop of Horrors while listening to this song. And Little Shop of Horrors is one of my favorite musicals. So I guess I'm a sucker for songs about killer plants. But man, I've been there's some really cool stuff in the like some of the instrumental stuff. Like then Tony Banks comes in and plays the organ, and there's some really cool organ stuff on this album, or at least this song, and then actually the album in general, but it really shines on this song, and then the guitar playing, and then even Peter Gabriel, he back to playing the flute again. He also played it on Musical Box. I forgot to mention, and hearing the flute in sync with the some of the guitar licks, I thought was really epic. And I thought it had a really cool finish. And I guess I'll spill the beans. This is my favorite song on the album.
You were talking about Tony Banks. What I really like about Tony Banks is just like his technical skill as a keyboard player. Like and that's what I really like about all eras of Genesis is that Tony Banks is one of the consistent members. Like he's one of the ones who's on all the albums. It's his playing. His playing on the early albums when he plays the piano and the organ and the mellotron, and then whenever he transitioned into the '80s, like he switches from those things to like digital synthesizers, but like he doesn't lose his touch, his invisible touch, with the keyboard. Like he's always doing something super interesting with like pianos and keyboards and making all kinds of weird sounds, and I love that. You can especially hear that at the beginning whenever he makes that. And then Steve Hackett is harmonizing with that. Tony Banks on the keyboard is playing the higher part, and then Steve Hackett is doing the lower part. And then what's interesting is that how Steve Hackett is doing that is he's using a technique that people don't really talk about until the 70s when Van Halen made it popular. He's doing two-hand tapping. Now he's doing it very different than Van Halen did, because Van Halen kind of perfected that, but he's like hammer is like boom down 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 do 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 do, or except that's Tony Banks just like do 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 do. And so I think that's really cool whenever they both play together because it makes this really cool weird sound because you get the keyboard and you get the guitar with doing those triplet things. And then yeah, Phil Collins, this is the one that sets Phil Collins apart. His drumming, as soon as he comes in, you're like, whoa. He's doing like this shuffle feel, and I'm like, every time I hear those drums come in, I'm like, this is some of the best drumming I've ever heard. This is insane. And then you get to the part where Peter Gabriel sings, and Tony Banks is playing the organ underneath that, kind of telling this comical tale about these explorers that found this bush and planted it, and it became a hogweed monster or whatever, and it's going to destroy humanity. This is where the British humor really comes in. I love the part where it goes like bow, 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 bow. Like, I don't know why, but that reminds me of Willy Wonka. I don't know why, but it sounds like some kind of demented Oompa Loompa song. Bow, 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 bow. Bow, 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 bow. Yeah. And then he gets like he keeps singing higher and higher. The giant hogweed, ba ba, dun 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 dun, ba 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 ba. The organ comes in there, and then Peter Gabriel plays the flute while they're keeping that riff. Bow ba down ba down, bow 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 down, bow bow bow. And then you get to this cool middle section where it just kind of cuts out and Tony Banks is playing the piano and it's like, whoa, this is cool. And then like it keeps building and building, and Peter Gabriel is very dramatic on this song. Like in general, Peter Gabriel is a very dramatic singer. he really hams it up on stage, wears all these weird costumes and recites like meaningless poetry before the songs, and then he'll like ham it up and do all these facial expressions and get into the song. But you can really tell that he's having fun singing this song, especially when they put those vocal effects on his voice near the end, and then it just kind of ends with a grand like finishes off very well. This is also my favorite song on the album, spoiler alert. It is amazing. Okay, so now that we are done with Return of the Giant Hogweed, we are going to get to 7 Stones.
Yeah. If we both had a copy of this album, we'd have flipped the record.
Flip the record. I need to get this one.
All right, 7 Stones. I like this one too. Not as much as the last song. We're going ballad territory on this one, but Genesis can do ballads well, even during this prog rock era. I don't like it as much as some of the other songs on this album, but I think Peter Gabriel does a good job singing the song. And again, Phil Collins does an amazing job on the drums.
This song is really cool. I like how it kind of starts off as a ballad, but then like Tony Banks in the middle plays like the mellotron, and that's one of my favorite instruments because it just makes this crappy sounding orchestra sound. Like every time that Tony Banks plays the mellotron, it just adds this other dimension of sound. He does it again on another song coming up, but like every time that kicks in, it's like, this is amazing. It just washed over you with sound. So I really like this song. Now we are going to get to one of the most infamous songs on the album, Harold the Barrel.
What to say about Harold the Barrel? It's one of the weirdest songs I've ever heard in my life. But I really like this one. It's in my top 3 on this album. I like the dark comedy of this song, which is kind of weird because you look at the underlying lyrics of the song, and it's really messed up. You got this guy named Harold that really wants to kill himself. And by all accounts, I should not like this song because suicide's such a heavy subject, and the fact that they're making a joke on it, I'm like, that just sounds off. But the way this song is put together, I think both Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel, who both co-lead this song vocally, I think do a really good job on like the tongue-in-cheek aspect of the song. And I think the song still shows that it's still bad. Like the way they approach the situation, and I think they're comically defining the situation and like the publicity surrounding it. And I'm like, okay, I think I see where you're going with this song, and I do actually enjoy the weirdness of the song. That I don't know why, like some of these weird songs, I'm kind of getting into between this, the Hogweed on the earlier on this
that's
album.
Kind of Genesis for you. Early Genesis is weird but cool.
Even Don't Try Suicide on Queen's the Game album. I'm like probably the only person that really likes that song.
Oh, not that one.
But yeah, this is one of the better songs on the album. I like the weirdness of it. The weird thing is vocally, I actually heard Phil Collins more on this song more than I did Peter Gabriel, and this is one where I think he really got the shine on this one. And I don't really have much to add. I think it's a really wacky but memorable song.
So yeah, it's kind of a dark humor song, but like it's so whimsical. I like when you hear this, you're like, what the heck is this? The big hero of this song is Tony Banks, who's playing that rollicking piano line underneath, and then you got Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel kind of trading off and making these overpronounced Cockney accents, talking about Harold the Barrel. Hey, don't jump, Harold. Come talk to us, Harry, or whatever it is. And And like every once in a while they go like blub 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 or whatever, make like funny sounds. It's British humor, tongue in cheek. Like it is about a dark subject, but like I can't help but like chuckle every time I hear this song just because it's so ridiculous. It is also one of my favorite songs on the album. Yeah, yes, it's stupid, but it's stupid in a good way. Like this is amazing. I really like this song. It's a very fun song. Now we are going to get to Harlequin.
I don't think this has anything to do with the DC character, but this song's okay. It's probably my second to least favorite song on the album. The production on the song's pretty good. It's like probably the closest they got to a Baroque sounding song, which I do like that touch. But again, kind of like my thoughts on For Absent Friends, this kind of feels like a shoe-in track to get to from one really good song to another really good song, and I don't think this one is as memorable as some of the best tracks on the album.
This is my least favorite song on the album. I still think it's good. I like Steve Hackett's guitar playing on this song. Adds to the Baroque feel. That being said, I enjoy it when I listen to it. It does kind of feel more like a transitional song, but it's still pretty good. But I know we're all waiting to talk about the last one. The Fountain of Salmacis.
Yeah, this is another great song and a really cool way to close the album. We're 2 for 2 on really epic album closers between this and The Knife. I think The Knife is still the better closer, but this is still a really cool way to close the album. Again, another weird story. This is based on Greek mythology, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm not familiar with the Greek myth, but I did partially look it up while listening to the song, and I'm like, this is kind of a messed up subject matter. Just like, again, another twisted romance story almost of these two souls that kind of merge into one. I don't know how that works, but I don't know. The Greeks were on some weird stuff when cooking up these stories.
I think if I'm not mistaken, the Greeks had like a chasm where like a strange fog came up and they would breathe it in. I think they must have got high on that.
Yeah, they could be. But this is still one of the coolest songs on this album. Like the storytelling from Peter Gabriel was good, but musically is where this song really shines. Like all of the band members really get their chance to shine on this song, especially. I think more so out of all the songs on this album. Like you got Peter Gabriel, who does a good job vocally and gets to show off the flute again. Tony Banks doesn't. He really gets to shine on the organ and the mellotron. Mike Rutherford has a really cool bass solo in this song, which is really cool. You got Steve Hackett, who does some good guitar work, and then Phil Collins on drums. And it's cool that on this one, you really get to see Genesis act like a band, where they give each band member a chance to shine. And I thought that was really cool, while also telling this really weird story based on Greek mythology in the middle of it. And this is one of the best songs on the album. It's in my top 3.
That's kind of a good way to describe these early Genesis albums as weird but cool. Yeah, this song is amazing. I love the organ at the beginning. It's like do 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 do, and then like the mellotron comes in. Like it just washes over your head. It's like whoa. Not the first time I listened to it, but like when I listened to it recently, when I hadn't listened to this album in a while, I listened through these headphones, and these are like really nice headphones. And so when that mellotron came in, it was like. I was like, whoa, what's this song? And then when Phil Collins comes in, Phil Collins is the drumming on this song is insane. Like, oh my goodness. Phil Collins is really on the top of his game on this album. Mike Rutherford, you talked about his bass earlier, really good. And then Steve Hackett doing these really cool, like almost ethereal guitar sounds. Peter Gabriel singing. This song is epic in every sense of the word. And that is going to bring us to our top 5 songs on the album.
All right. Well, since there's only 7 songs, I'll just rank all 7.
Yeah, that
If
might
you
be a
don't
good
mind.
idea.
So at the bottom, number 7, For Absent Friends, and then number 6 is Harlequin. Top 5. Number 5, Seven Stones. Number 4, The Musical Box. Number 3, Harold the Barrel. Number 2, The Fountain of Salmacis, and my favorite song on this album is The Return of the Giant Hogweed.
So for me, number 7 is Harlequin. Number 6 is For Absent Friends. Number 5, Seven Stones. Number 4, Harold the Barrel. Number 3, Musical Box. Number 2, Fountain of Salmacis. And then number 1, Return of the Giant Hogweed.
Aside from 2 songs, our lists are quite similar.
Mm-hmm. What would you give this album out of a scale of 1 to 10?
Okay, so their debut album I gave a 6 out of 10, and I gave Trespass an 8 out of 10. With Nursery Cryme, this one I'll give a 9 out of 10. I think this is, I'm going to say, their first great album as a band. I think the addition of Phil Collins and Steve Hackett speaks wonders into the quality of their sound. There's 2 filler tracks on this album that feel more like transitional pieces, but the rest of the songs on this album are absolutely epic, and you really get to see the greatness of Genesis during this era, and I'm excited to listen to these other albums coming up to see if they're as good or even better than this album.
Oh yeah, the next 3 albums are like this. Like, the quality doesn't diminish. You're gonna get, the next album is Foxtrot, which a lot of people consider to be their finest album. It features their longest song and what many people consider to be their magnum opus, Supper's Ready, which is a 20-minute epic. That you're probably going to love that song. The musicianship is top-notch. But there's also some other really cool songs on that album. And then we're going to get to Selling England by the Pound, which a lot of other people say is their best album, which has amazing musicianship on that one as well. Then you're going to get the epic double album, Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, which both Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel say is their favorite Genesis album. So and that's going to be the end of Peter Gabriel years. But for me, I'm actually going to give this one the Big 10.
Oh, wow.
I know it has Harlequin and Absent Friends on it, but, like, I don't know, they kind of contribute to the mood of the album. Like you said, they're kind of transitional pieces that are little cool downs. Like, you're like, oh my goodness, I got a cool down from Musical Box. That was a lot to remember. It's like, oh, here's Phil Collins singing a nice little ballad for you. Oh no, hit me in the face again with this amazing riff at the beginning. And it's like Seven Stones, you're recovering from Tony Banks' Mellotron. It's like, oh, and then Harold the Barrel is like, what the heck was that? Oh, here's a nice little ballad for you, Harlequin. And then you get hit in the face with Fountain of Salmacis, that epic opening. I don't know if there's, like, there might be more 10 out of 10 Genesis albums. We'll have to see, because I'm going to be honest with you, I have not listened to the Peter Gabriel stuff very much. When I first did my listen through Genesis back in 2021, I kind of ignored that because I thought it was boring. My musical tastes have expanded since then. But re-listening to this stuff, it's amazing. So I'm excited to get to dive into Foxtrot pretty soon because that album is amazing. And I'm also, like, I like both eras. I'm excited to cover Phil Collins' stuff as well. I was actually listening to the self-titled album with my roommate last night, and that's a pretty good album.
I will say, listening to these albums, I can see why Nick especially is a big fan of this era. Because this album especially is awesome.
Yeah. And I'm kind of at least seeing the opinions of the people who are saying that they sell out later on because it's not as epic. but I still hear the great musicianship later on. It's just a more radio friendly sound.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with having a radio friendly sound.
Not at all.
Especially if the songs are still of high quality. And
Yeah.
like,
Especially since like Steve Hackett left Genesis because he said he thought that they had reached their maximum potential and that they'd done everything they'd set out to do, and I can kind of see that they accomplished everything they could progressive rock wise. Like, where do you go when you make Supper's Ready? So I can kind of see why they would transition and do a more commercial sound, because like that's kind of the sound of the times. But that's my little mini rant about Phil Collins versus Peter Gabriel eras. We look forward to seeing you next time on our episode of Foxtrot whenever we get to review Supper's Ready. But in the meantime, remember that music is art and art is expression, even if you're Phil Collins, so don't diss him. See you next time.
Good night.
Harold the Barrel says good night.